Estás viendo Canal América, televisión dominicana para el mundo.
A Time for Truth show is sponsored by the Office of Dr. Bernard Fialkoff, a periodontal, dental implant and laser specialist in New York City, for over 40 years. Dr. Fialkoff was honored by the International College of Dentists and Pierre Fauchard, and received the Presidential Lifetime Humanitarian Honor from the White House. Call us at 718-229-3838.
Sometimes life can be so damn hard. You don't know where to go. Everything keeps falling apart. Yeah. You try to do your best, but only God knows that you've given everything you've got, but the world takes you down. You just keep moving on. Let your fears.
Welcome to A Time for Truth show. It's a pleasure to be back with you again tonight. I'm your host, Dr. Bernard Fialkoff. And first, let's take care of some housekeeping, because many of you want to become members. Ask, how do I do that? It's very simple. Go on YouTube, click A Time for Truth show. Find the subscribe button, give it a click. We'd love to have you as one of our subscribers. There's no fee, there's no requirements. The only qualification is that you use the knowledge what we give you to help our communities, our societies. And tonight, it's a very interesting program, because my wife and I were walking outside, taking a nice stroll, and I was looking at the trees, and I said to her, it's amazing how beautiful they are. And during the winter, they look like they were dead. And it's amazing that they come back every year in the spring. The flowers come out, and they bloom. And she and I were talking, and we realized the miracle and really the mystery of this alive structure that probably we don't pay much attention to until if it falls on our house, or a limb breaks, or something bad happens. But reality is they're an amazing part of nature. And so tonight we're going to be talking about the secret life of trees. Why? Because tonight we begin into something that seems so common that most of us probably don't pay any attention. We pass every day without realizing the amazing engineering hidden inside that live structure. A tree, silent, rooted in the earth. It doesn't move around like we do. And yet, it's a living structure. In fact, it's amazing because water is being lifted upwards many times more than 50 feet, 100 feet, 150 feet, against gravity, without a sump pump, a mechanical pump, no mechanical feature. And what we're about to embark on this segment is one of the most elegant systems in nature, and one of the deepest mysteries, if we really want to look at it, of existence. Because how is this happening? Why does it occur without a problem? And so let's go to the next slide, engineer. And we're going to look at this giant hydraulic living system, because every tree is actually a hydraulic machine. From the smallest roots underground to the highest leaves up in the air, reaching toward the sunlight. But what's amazing is water is continuously moving through microscopic channels. In fact, very interesting, a mature tree can actually transport hundreds of gallons of water in a single day. To me, it's amazing. And all of this occurs quietly, without tumult. The trees don't go on strike. They don't demand a higher hourly wage. We're very lucky. It all goes on automatically, every second of our lives. And it's actually an amazing thing, and it starts us to think about, well, maybe this is a successful process in existence. Let's go to the next image, and we're going to talk about the challenge that this life structure faces, that we all face actually when we walk or run up the steps or go up steps. We realize how gravity pulls us down. If we go up a few floors, it gets exhausting. You run out of breath. But this tree is doing it continuously all day long, nonstop. So how is it doing this? How is it doing this higher than a tall building in Manhattan, in Chicago? At first glance, we would say it's not possible. Yet obviously, the forests of the earth and the trees that we see are continuously existing and solving this problem every single moment. I think it's amazing. I think it's a miracle. I think it's interesting to take a look at it in terms of life and what really do we understand about life. But let's first look mechanically and look at what life has actually produced inside the tree. And let's go to the next slide. And we're going to go into something called xylem, very interesting word, which is inside the trunk of the tree. And as you see on the screen, they're tiny little structures, the little microscopic tubes that you see there. You see it in cross section, and you see it in longitudinal section. And these microscopotubules of xylem form an immense transport network. You know, almost like a train or a monorail. And it stretches from the roots below ground to the leaves up in the air. The xylem acts like internal plumbing. And it solves itself. It's not like in our homes where we get a leak and we have to call in the plumber. It repairs itself. It's its own internal plumbing system, carrying water through the body of the tree without electricity, without somebody doing some mechanical force or pressure. But unlike human plumbing, there is no pump. The water is being lifted by the tree through all its mechanisms. And it actually is amazing how nature has resolved this with extraordinary properties. And we'll start out first with the water itself. And let's go to the next image. And we'll take a look at how water molecules actually work together. Probably the water molecules should give human beings and all of us an education or a seminar on working together, because the water molecules actually do something called cohesion. And they actually have tremendous liking one for the other, attraction one for the other. They don't fight with each other. And they actually, as you see on that leaf, they cling to each other. And as I said scientifically, it's called cohesion, where each molecule of the water gently pulls on the next, but not to fight with each other, but to create a continuous sheet or chain of water molecules that in the tree extend from the ground and the roots through the trunk up into the leaves, almost like a water rope, you could almost say, because they're clinging one to the other. And these invisible ropes inside the tree are made and consist entirely of the water that we see running out of our faucets and that we drink. Now, another interesting thing that the water does, it has an action called capillary action that you see on the bottom right of the image. And what it happens is these xylem tubules that we talked about are incredibly narrow, very, very small. And what happens in spaces that small, the water climbs up in those microscopic tubules naturally, upward, with that force that we're going to call capillary action. And the water sticks to the walls of those xylem tubules while simultaneously pulling each other. So they pull each other upwards. And this effect alone helps the tree, in collaboration with the water, to move this movement, this hydraulic movement. But that's not alone, because much more is required. And, you know, we have to go further with what's happening. So let's go and see much more and go on to the next image, please, engineer. And here we see the leaves of the tree. In actuality, even though they seem they're there for decoration or to get sun only or to bring color, the reality is the leaves actually are the workers creating the pole. And you say, well, how can a leaf pull? It's just sitting there attached to the tree. Well, the true engine is not underground, but is up in the sky and laterally on that tree. And what happens is as the sunlight shines on the leaves and warms the leaf surface, the water starts to evaporate into the air. And that evaporation miraculously causes tension and a pulling force that's exerted on the xylem tubules, the water that's in the tubule with capillary action and cohesion. And as they pull, because the water is connected one molecule to the other, the leaves actually pull upward through the entire tree and cause this water to go up possibly 300 feet. No pumps, no electricity, no director, all in concert, in collaboration. And something called transpiration occurs. What is this process of transpiration? Well, what it is millions and millions of these evaporations occur continuously across all of the leaves of the tree. And together, the force that's generated, the upward pull, is strong enough to move that water to astonishing heights. You say, well, it's not possible. In fact, the larger trees actually pull this water about 300 feet up into the air. You can imagine that. It's like an amazing miracle. And we walk by the tree, we're not realizing any of these things. Now imagine in an apartment complex, the electricity involved, or the oil burning for the furnace, or the pumps, to bring that water up that we have to exert, that the tree is doing on its own, in collaboration, as an organism and an organization. That tree is an amazing organization working together. So let's go to the next slide and we'll keep going on this unbelievable miracle of the tree. We're going to talk about something called stomata. What are these stomata? Well, on the surface of each leaf, there are tiny pores. We call them stomata. And these microscopic openings regulate the exchange of gases and the water. It allows the evaporation, and when they open with the sunlight, it allows the tree or the plant to assimilate carbon dioxide, because not only are trees amazing hydraulic systems, they're amazing oxygen providing systems. And trees and plant life create oxygen from the carbon dioxide which we inhale. We exhale, and the trees inhale the carbon dioxide and exhale oxygen. Trees are very important to preserve on our planet beyond their beauty, beyond their fruit or food production, for the mere oxygen that they produce along with the algae in the oceans, that without which we wouldn't have a replenishment of oxygen in our atmosphere, which would obviously we would not be too happy about as human beings or the animals on the surface, because we all, as animal forms, use the oxygen. So these stomata open, the CO2 comes in, the water evaporates, pull up more water, and there's photosynthesis, and the tree starts making more energy. Every pore or stomata allows water to escape, so the tree is constantly balancing its survival with conservation. Another aspect that I wanted to touch upon as human beings, but probably and most essentially, we need to also take a look at, are we conserving as well as we're surviving? Or we just want to survive without regard to conserving? What happens to the waste that's created by our race, by our human race? What happens to the effects that we create on the animal kingdom, on the plant kingdom? Is that conserving this amazing natural harmony, collaboration that exists? We need to take a look at that. This is one of the things that I was walking by the tree, I realized it was amazing to me, because they also don't go on strike. You don't see the trees fighting with each other, arguing with each other that you're working more than me, or I want more of the dirt than you. I know it sounds maybe a little bit ridiculous or Walt Disney-ish, but in reality, some of the most simple things are very powerful, and when they're neglected, lead to catastrophic consequences. So each stomata is actually controlled by what's called the guard cell. And these tiny living cells expand and contract depending on the sun or the darkness or nighttime, whether there's rain, whether there's drought. And these living cells act as microscopic valves that open at times when the environment is amenable and close when it's not. Again, showing the dynamic ability and reality of life, of existence. Because if they didn't open and close at times, either the tree could suffocate or it could dry out. Again, taking a look at the miracle of life and the cycle that each organism goes through to create survival, existence, future. Something that this program really is bringing out is actually appreciation for what we actually obtain. And many times, because these other portions of life don't talk to us, don't complain until we get the bitter cold that we experienced this year, we don't really pay attention. We take it for granted. And it's a bit of a flaw that we need to change as human beings. Let's go to the next image, and let's take a look at how light activates this system, how it activates the guard cells, because they detect light, especially blue wavelength of light. And these special guard cells with their proteins respond to that wavelength from the sun. And when it strikes the receptors, electrical and chemical signals activate the pumps in those cells, and the pores open based on that stimulus, that communication, which is another thing to cover here because the Surgeon General of the United States of America spoke about how our crisis of non-communication in the United States of America was leading scientifically to physical ailments, diabetes, cardiovascular disease, dementia, arthritis, early mortality. And the Surgeon General talked that our lack of communication and lack of collaboration was equivalent to smoking 10 or 15 cigarettes per day. So, therefore, this segment today of the tree and the collaboration organization within that organism. The tree is continuously sensing and responding to its environment. It doesn't need news media, social media, but relies on its own inherent certainty and perception to modify its behavior. Again, something to take a look at, because at times when we go on automatic pilot inside our cars or on our cell phones, it seems like we become oblivious to what's going on around us. And again, I want to quote the highest physician of the country, the Surgeon General of the United States of America, who's also come out about the need for us to communicate more in vivo, in person, and not to rely on cell phones and not to disappear. And so these guard cells with the light have electrical changes that occur. The potassium goes into the cells, and as it does, that pulls the water into the cells because of something called osmosis. And this silent choreography of ions and water unfolds every moment inside the leaf. Actually, the plant kingdom possesses an astonishing communication system of signals electrically, of ion flows, of hormones, and collaboration with no central leader, with a total communication and cooperation to create survival. Let's go to the next image and let's take a look at ancient origins. How did this come to be? Was it something we just won immediately, or did it take time? Well, obviously, you're talking about something that took tremendous effort, hundreds of millions of years. Why do I bring that out? Because as human beings, sometimes we're impatient. And we don't realize that our impatience leads to consequences which causes an imbalance in this system that's taken hundreds of millions of years to have where we live. So that when we find out about greenhouses effect and pollution in the oceans, we're aghast, but because we weren't perceiving, we weren't looking, we weren't thinking in harmony. We were only thinking really of mankind, almost ignoring the rest of nature. Over immense spans of time, evolution refined these ecosystems that we have, these biological systems we have, which the trees are part of, and took generation after generation, selecting improvements, and the water transport became more efficient, and the tree became more pro-survival, and the coordination became more sophisticated, so that we had tremendous forests that developed, but it took time. Let's go to the next slide, engineer, and look at this great unsolved mystery. Probably the greatest mysteries that we have. Because yes, we've explained mechanically and scientifically how the tree does this, how it responds to light, how evolution occurred. But the ultimate question, how did this begin? How did all this matter coordinate and become alive? How does that cell survive the winter and come back in the springtime? How does a tree survive? It's not like the bear who eats before wintertime, before he hibernates. How did this chemistry become biology and alive? In reality, as we get now to the end of the segment, which is really not the end, but the beginning where I really invite you to look invite you to really look at the simplicity that we've taken for granted. What is the answer of life? Let's go to the next slide, and let's go to a closing reflection. I hope you like the image, because we're back to the tree with the sun shining, the beauty of nature. It's really quite amazing. But as human beings, we still ask each other, how is it possible? The next time you stand by that tree, remember what we've gone over in the show and the miracle that's going on inside silently. The invisible rivers climbing upwards, the microscopic valves and cells working in unison continuously, the signaling systems through the living tissue, the coordination occurring every moment without strife, without conflict. And yet behind it lies one of the greatest mysteries ever known. How did this occur? Where did life come from? Many philosophies, religions, metaphysical systems, and spiritual traditions have looked in this and have come up with an answer. That consciousness, spirit, and non-material intelligence existed before the earth, before physical life, sharing the idea that reality is not just purely this material that we have around us, but that our spirituality and nature spirituality and life spirituality, and that cause precedes the material existences that we see. This is exemplified by Plato, by Pythagoreanism, Taoism, the Kabbalah, Christian mysticism, metaphysics, theosophy, cosmology, Hinduism, Buddhism, Scientology, so many different philosophies, religions, viewpoints. And as we close into this great miracle and this great mystery and secret, let's mention some mind-expanding quotes of some men and leaders at the end of this show. And first I'll give you one from Albert Einstein, who said the most beautiful thing we can experience is the mysterious. And why did he say that? I think so we would look, so we would experience and not be afraid of what we couldn't answer, not to get upset and fight with one another. And then from Buddhism, very interesting quote, we are what we think. More than we are, obviously the world is what we think. And all that we are arises with our thoughts. So the importance of our thoughts, of what we think, of how we think, of negative or positive, and the consequences that occurred. And Carl Sagan, who said somewhere, something incredible is waiting to be known. And lastly, from Ron Hubbard, who said, before the beginning was a cause, and the entire purpose of the cause was the creation of effect. I hope you've enjoyed this segment. Life is a miracle. Life is a mystery. Life is something to really be appreciated. Take a look at what we've gone over today and the miracle of what nature does for us, and see if we need to exchange more with nature and with each other. We'll see you on the next episode of A Time for Truth show. Be well.
This show was sponsored by A Time for Truth Foundation Incorporated as a community service.
Sometimes life can be so damn hard. You don't know where to go. Everything keeps falling apart. Yeah. You try to do your best, but only God knows that you've given everything you've got. But the world takes you down. You just keep moving on. at your feet.